Hello everyone, welcome back to my little YouTube channel about the Africa Twin. Haven't done much this winter at all. It's been kind of quiet, really cold here in Ontario, Canada, and just haven't felt like spending much time in the garage. But I did buy some parts. So what I'm planning on doing here is I'm going to install some bar risers, and I'm going to be changing out the flimsy stock handguards for some Barkbusters. So the reason why I'm doing the bar risers has nothing to do with my body. My body shape and size and everything is perfectly fine for the controls and how they're set up on the bike. But I do like having, this is a carryover from motocross, I like having my hands down a bit, my fingers on the clutch and on the brake. I don't like them up. And the way the bike was set up from the factory is your hands are up further. So I end up tilting my controls down a bit. But because the hand guards are tied into the mirror perch and tied into all the other controls, when you rotate the clutch and brake down, the mirror rotates down and so do the hand guards. The issue with that is that right here, as you turn the bars all the way around, if you don't have the hand guards like pushed up and they are able to move, they do rub on the tank right here. So the goal is to get more clearance between the bars, the hand guards and the tank, and avoid scuffing right in this area. So I bought some inexpensive bar risers off of Amazon. I'm going to install those. I think they're 3/4 of an inch, so not a huge raise, but it should be just enough to raise it up so I get that clearance. Then I did buy Barkbusters to go on. These are the standard units for this particular bike. Got them from Fortnite. And I ended up going with the blue jet handguards that go with the Barkbusters. I went with these instead of white, just to add a little bit more color. Other people have commented that the blue is closer to the Tenere blue, and I'm not arguing with them, but there's enough different shades of blue on the bike that I think another shade of blue, I don't think it's going to hurt anything. I think I held them up and it seems to look okay. I'll show you kind of what the colors look like here. I don't know. I think they'll look fine. I'll show you guys what they look like once they're installed. I'm going to start with the installation of the bar risers. I'll run through that and then I'll install the Barkbusters. There's enough videos out there showing how to install Barkbusters. I'm probably not going to spend too much time dwelling on the installation, but I'm sure you can find other people who have made some pretty decent videos on how to install them, but kind of do a quick run through of it and how they look afterwards. You'll need a 12mm socket to loosen the screws on the stock handlebar clamps. We can loosen those guys off. I believe you reuse the existing taps, but the bar riser kit comes with longer screws. They are stainless steel screws. You can kind of see the length difference of each screw. It's about another 20mm longer, which makes sense because the bar risers are a 3/4 lift, so they do end up going to a socket head style screw as opposed to a hex head. So you will need different tools for the install. Doesn't appear that there's a forward or back positioning for them. It looks like they're symmetrical. There's no right or left, they are 100% the same. So we'll just lift the bars out, and then we'll hopefully be able to quickly install the brackets. One side's loose, and the other side's loose. keep them aligned. Line up your marks on the bars from where they were in the clamps before, so that you know the bars are going to be positioned right to left where they were previously. Now your clamps do have a front-back relationship, so make sure you're putting them back on in the same orientation that you took them off. Looking at this kit, one thing that's missing from it is washers. So the screw that came out has a flared head on it with a built-in washer to the screw, to the actual screw head. The new replacement screws do not have that washer. So I'll dig through my supplies and see if I can find an appropriately sized washer to fit under the head of the screw. Alright, so luckily in my wall of spare bolts and washers and nuts and everything, I did end up finding 4 washers suitable for M8 screws. They fit quite nicely. So I'm going to add the washers to each one of these 4 screws. Also, I am going to put a little bit of Loctite on the screw. Just a dab on each one. Alright, all 4 screws have washers, all 4 screws have a dab of Loctite on them. Now we can go ahead and get them lined up and tightened up. Each one just snugged up ever so slightly. So there they are installed. They're not fully tightened yet, of course, but to check the clearance, if I crank that right over, you can see now quite a bit of clearance compared to what I had. So although 3/4 of an inch doesn't seem like very much, it's enough to make sure that I'm not damaging the tank as the bar rotates all the way to its limits. So I'll snug these up and then I'm going to start the install of the Barkbusters. Okay, to install the Barkbusters, first we have to remove the existing handguards. So there is the bar end mount here that goes into the end of the mount, or end of the handlebar, and then as well on the clutch and brake perch, there's a screw that goes all the way through here. So there's an upper bracket and as well a lower bracket down here. So you have to actually physically remove that bolt right there beside the mirror perch. And it goes underneath right there. You can see the nut. So we'll take those off both sides and then we'll follow the instructions for the Barkbusters for the install. So when dismantling the handlebar end screw, that is obviously Loctited or has some thread locker on there. And it does take quite a bit of force to get that to crack. So just be aware that it might take more force than you're expecting it to get that to remove. Okay, so I've got one side completed. I installed the new weight that comes with the Barkbuster handguard. Installed the new bracket here that wraps around the handlebar. The left side or clutch side has a spacer that you have to put in to hold that out away from the clutch, the perch, and provide for adjustment. So the other side, the brake side, does not have that. It's just the clutch side. So what I'll show now is me installing the right side and you can follow along how I'm doing that. So on this side, I've already removed the bar end weight, the original Honda one. As you can see, it had some thread locker on it as well, which took a little bit of force to get it to break. This has a washer on it a rubber washer that went between it and the handguard, and it's got its own screw that goes through. None of that's retained with the Barkbuster kit. There is a different bar and adapter you thread in. There's some washers, and then you also have a different weight that goes in there as well. There are washers that go on the throttle side to space out from the grip. Barkbusters doesn't really give you direct indication how many you require, but they say to use as many as required to make sure you get spacer between it and the adapter. So I'll show you how it's installed. There's the new bar end weight it comes with, and there's the new adapter that goes in the end of the handlebar. So this part is no longer accessible, so you have to make sure it's good and tight. Which it is. And then the adapter goes over top here. So this is where they're referring to having washers to hold that out. So I'm wondering if you embed washers inside here to space it out. They do give you a singular washer together with the mounting screw. Perhaps they think that singular washer is sufficient. See, it is the correct size to go over that screw, and I believe they're intending it for it just to fit inside there like that. So we'll see how that works. There is definitely a gap there now with that washer in place, whereas without the washer in place, it's tight against that grip, the rubber grip. So perhaps one washer is sufficient after all. So don't want to tighten that on just yet. Here is the aluminum backbone which supports the plastic handguard. You notice it is countersunk. That matches the countersunk screw head. Try to be careful not to drop that against my paint. The Barkbusters are handed, by the way. So on the right hand side it dips down. You can see that it has a shape to it. So the instructions say to just loosely tighten this to allow for some physical movement of this as you make your final adjustments with the bracket on the handlebar. So we'll just kind of get this finger tight to start off with. And yeah, there's lots of clearance for the throttle, so it's not grabbing at all. Just rest that down there so it's not touching the paint. The bracket itself that goes on the handlebar has a shape to it. They are handed as well. So this is the right hand side one. It's angled so that when that attaches to the handlebar, this comes up and has a flat surface to go and mount against the backbone. So I'll show you how this installs. Just going to kind of get loosely in place here. It is a little bit snug with all the cables. Take that guy up. This has to come back a bit, the handlebar. Okay, we've got everything snugged up on this side. What the issue was, were the cables here, they were tied up with one of these little cable clamps up against the brake line. And the brake line, the bracket for the handguard wants to sit right up tight against the brake line. And it doesn't leave a lot of room in there. You can see how snug it is. So I had to loosen off that clamp for these cables and take them underneath the bracket here, because they would not fit up top here with the brake line. So I'm going to put the other cable clamp on there, just behind it, to snug it up. Now, obviously the right side is the one that's the most restrictive for positioning because of the brake reservoir and brake line. So I'm going to position the left side to the same elevation and try and get it as even as possible. So once I've got them both snugged up in the right position, I'll show you the final install. All right, so I've got both sides now fully tightened and positioned where I want them to be. You can see from the front of the bike, they are pretty close to being the same elevation. I've got the extra cable clamp installed back here. Looking from the cockpit, there's the approximate positioning of the clamps. A couple small things to note whenever you've got the old handguards removed. The bolt that goes through here, you'll notice it's raised off of the perch a bit. So that's a spacer for the old plastic handguard to fit in. And on the bottom of the handguard, there were these little spacer washers as well. So those are leftover parts. You don't need those to reinstall. The bottom of the perch, and that just threads right back up. That's common both sides. So you don't need that extra spacer washer to go back in. And the top, it just sits up a little bit because there's no plastic fit in between there. I suppose you could fit some washers, but it's tight. It doesn't want to move. It's threaded all the way in. So as I said, that's common for both sides. You can see it's sticking up a bit there, leaving the space left over from where that plastic handguard sat. So to note, the bracket is quite snug in this area where the cables are. I have this cable clamp positioned so it's the part rubbing on the bracket, not the cables themselves. Same thing goes there. It is quite snug where the brake line passes by that one screw for the bracket. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I don't expect them to be moving too much, but it's just something of note. So parts left over, these came off the bike. So these are the old bar end weights and the old adapters that go into the handlebar itself. As mentioned, you have the two spacer washers. Leftover parts that came with the Barkbuster kit. These are all associated with the DCT model. This is the parking brake bracket and some extra fasteners for those. They're not required if you have a manual bike. If you have the DCT bike, then those extra parts will be required for your handbrake over on the left side. Anyways, I'm going to fit the handguards and I'll show you what it looks like with the blue handguards installed. So the jet handguards, and I suspect this is the same for all of the Barkbuster handguards, they do come with some self-tapping screws that go through the mounting holes, and they will attach to the holes in the aluminum guards or the aluminum backbones. So I'll get them installed and show you what it looks like. Those are installed. See how it looks. There's the blue one from the front. I think that looks pretty sharp. Check for clearances all the way down. Plenty of clearance. That's nice to see. On this side, plenty of clearance to the tank. That is good. Yes, it's a different shade of blue, but I don't know, I think it looks pretty good. Overall, very happy. The install didn't take very long. I'd say about an hour total to install everything. It took me perhaps a little bit longer than you would expect, just because I'm trying to film this as I go, and it's the first time doing it, but I suspect it would go quicker if you were doing it yourself. Anyways, there you go. Hopefully that was informative. Happy with the look. These would be easy to swap out for bigger, larger ones. I think they have one called the Storm, where it's a all-encompassing larger handguard for perhaps better for colder weather, but these here should be good for keeping the stones off and perhaps some bugs off the hands. Yeah, very happy. All right, thanks all. Take care. Bye.